Juggernaut.
Hello you beautiful people, and welcome to part 3 of my Unpack attack, which is basically where I go through all of my stuff that was damaged from fire and from water, and basically see what survived, see what we've got, see what's still kicking, and see what's worth talking about. So I've done a little bit of digging through these piles that I have here. Let me just adjust the light. Hopefully that will look better on camera. Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, essentially I've done a bit of digging, I've done a bit of sorting out, so I've arranged stuff in categories like Super Nintendo and so on and so forth. So without further ado, let's see what we've uncovered this time. Let's start with Sega CD. Formula 1, Beyond the Limit. Now, I don't really remember much about this game, to be perfectly honest with you. I know that it had Formula 1 FMV clips throughout the game. It was a Formula 1 based realistic simulator in the vein of Monaco GP. But I don't really remember how it played. Looking at the screenshots now, it's still not ringing any bells either, so I'm guessing it's pretty forgettable. Let's move on. Something that isn't forgettable though is the Terminator. The Terminator. Excuse my horrific Arnie impersonation. Yeah. What a game. Completely different to the Sega Genesis, Mega Drive version and the SNES version and the Game Boy versions. This was all onto itself. It was even different from the NES version. This was undoubtedly the best version of the game by far. It started off predominantly in the Future War. Later on in the game you do go back into 1984, but for the most part you're in the Future War. You control Kyle Reese on his mission to rescue Sarah Connor from the dreaded Terminator. And even though the box art is one of the worst in history, it looks like anybody could have designed that. It looks like shite. The gameplay was absolutely stellar, well worth playing. This wasn't though, this was Power Factory, and you didn't really play this game. This is one of the Make My Video series, and I used to get a kick out of it as a kid. Basically you'd get 3 monitors up on the screen, all showing different public domain video clips, and you would cut them and paste them and edit them and add visual effects to them in tune to the music, and you'd get graded upon your performance. Not much of a game, but for some reason I really got a kick out of these Make My Video games. And they did a whole series of them. They did Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, which is now known as Mark Wahlberg, of course. They did an In Excess version. They did a crisscross version. Yeah, definitely a product of a bygone era. That wouldn't fly nowadays. Next up, ESPN Sunday Night NFL. Yes, an American football game, and quite a very good one actually, to be fair. Okay, it doesn't have the Madden moniker on it, but this was pretty much the next best thing you could get when this was released. When did this come out? Where's the year? Yeah, this came out in 1993, and this was absolutely the next best thing that you could get for Madden. And Bill Walsh College Football, of course, on the Mega CD. Bill Walsh College Football was essentially Madden, but with college teams, and it was superb. Following up, Mansion of the Hidden Souls, also known as Yumami Mystery Mansion. This was on my top 50 Sega Mega CD and 32X games lists. It's a very early FMV interactive adventure, and it was kind of really creepy and unsettling, and I loved it. It's very slow paced, it's very methodical, there isn't a lot of action, but there's a hell of a lot of atmosphere in that game. Well worth checking out still. Stellar Fire, starring Worf from Star Trek. And that's about all it had going for it, to be perfectly honest with you. It's very primitive 3D. It looked bad even compared to Star Fox. Okay, you could rotate in 360 degrees, whoop-de freaking do, and it had Worf's voice in it, but it just wasn't good. It wasn't good. It was an average game at best. Same could be said for Racing Aces, really. This is a game that nobody really talks about, and I can fully understand why, because it was forgettable, really forgettable. It was a racing game, but an aerial racing game, which is a fairly untested genre. But the problem with Racing Aces was that A, the graphics were very primitive, and B, there was no sensation of speed, so it was utterly kind of pointless. Now, this gets a lot of flack recently for the snowboarding levels especially, and the side-scrolling beat-em-up levels that were the same as the Sega Mega Drive version. However, I really liked the snowboarding levels. I thought the snowboarding levels were very cool. They are insanely difficult, but I really enjoyed them. I think Cliffhanger gets a bad rap, and it's certainly not as bad as the other versions of the game. The Mega CD one, I'd say if you can pick it up cheap, by all means do. Yeah, it's not bad. Here's another game that made my top 50 Sega Mega CD and 32X games. Flashback, The Quest for Identity. A brilliant platform game with rotoscoped characters similar to Prince of Persia. You basically control this guy called Conrad, and he has lost his memory, and all that he has with him is this hollow cube, and inside this hollow cube is a hologram of himself telling him what to do as time goes on. And it's a story that really grabs you quite quickly, and then the platforming and the action just keep you going. There are varied locations, varied missions. It's very interesting, and it mixes things up on a regular basis, and it's well worth playing. Flashback, if you haven't played it already, is on my top 50 or top 40 Mega CD games list and 32X games list for a reason. It kicks ass. And it was ported to a multitude of systems. The Mega CD one was one of the first with CG graphics in between as cutscenes. Beforehand they were all polygonal graphics used in engine, but this version used pre-rendered CG graphics, which looked really good for the time. Okay, so that's the end of the Sega CD. I can't talk today. That's the end of the Sega CD stuff. I've got a single Nintendo game here. Everyone knows Super Mario World. Hello! Yes, Super Mario World, again, has crept out of the woodwork to find itself in my pile. Super Mario World, one of the greatest platform games ever, from one of the greatest series of platform games ever. If you haven't played it, then just go. Leave, please. If you've never played Mario World, just leave. Go pick up a SNES controller right now. Right now. I'm watching you. Right now. Go play. And come back to me when you're done. Okay. Moving on to the PlayStation Portable. Clume, also known as Block Party, I believe it was called in the States. Clume is an excellent puzzle game. How do I explain it and what makes it so special? Kind of... Basically what you have to do is you rotate the blocks around so that they collide with other blocks and make them disappear. Doesn't exactly sound original and novel, but the way it's played and the way that the tension builds up through the puzzle game is phenomenal. Great game, absolutely love it. I know I haven't explained it fully, and I know it sounds kind of dull when I talk about it, but I can't explain it any better than that, really. It's just a cool game. Rengoku, the Tower of Purgatory. So this one, you have to climb your way up to the top of this tower, It's filled with enemies, and it's basically a hack and slash game. It was a launch PSP title. In fact, I think pretty much all the games on this list are essentially launch games for the PSP. I was lucky. I got my PSP, which is here. I got my first PSP. Here. This is my actual first PSP. Still got the screen protector on it, even after 12 years. It's still working, still doing great. I got my first PSP when I went travelling to see my wife's family in Asia, and I picked up my PSP for the bargain price. I think it was about $600 with a handful of games. This was one of the games I picked up. Not the best of the bunch that I picked, but it was fun, and it certainly showed off what the PSP could do in capable hands. Of course, Konami is no longer considered capable hands at this point. But this is one of the games that I thoroughly enjoyed. I enjoyed it on previous systems, and the PSP portable version was just a match made in heaven. Tony Hawk's Underground 2 Remix, what a game! What a game! I'm a big fan of the Tony Hawk series. Tony Hawk Underground 2 is known as one of the greatest versions of Tony Hawk, and this PSP version took everything that was famous in the console versions, added, I think it was over a dozen new levels. It might actually be more than that. Yeah, so there are 4 PSP exclusive levels, and there are 16 levels according to the box. You could do 4-player if you had 4 PSPs. You've got classic mode, which was like the old Tony Hawk's, where you had to beat objectives, and you also have story mode. Absolutely fantastic. It lost very little in the way of visual fidelity on the drop down from console to handheld, and it was just, this single-handedly made the purchase of the machine worthwhile. Absolutely amazing game. Followed by Twisted Metal Head On. This is one of the games I also picked up at the same time, because I am a huge Twisted Metal fan. This did not disappoint. Unlike some other Twisted Metal games that have been released recently, this felt like Twisted Metal, and I absolutely enjoyed it. This is a true follow-up to the Twisted Metal series. Insane car combat, insane violence and shooting and road rage and just general joy of playing it. Twisted Metal, even though it's an early PSP title, still will get the occasional playthrough now that I've uncovered it from my box. Wipeout Pure! Wow, this was not a launch game. This came out a bit later on. This came out in I think it was the same year, but it came out later in the year, maybe a few months after the machine launched. And this blew my socks off. Seeing graphics like this on a handheld just made me think, holy crap, really. It was like a portable PlayStation 2. And this certainly was a system seller for many people. I absolutely love Wipeout. You can play some of the levels of Wipeout Pure on the new Wipeout Omega collection on PS4, which I also have. And this added some new ways to play. There was this arena which got faster and faster and faster the more laps you did, and the idea was to survive for as long as possible without crashing into the walls and blowing up. That was really intense and super addictive back in the day. Ugh. Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest. Luckily, I didn't buy this with my own money. This was a review copy that was sent to me by the publisher back when I was doing video game reviews for an online blog, and this did not review favourably at all. It's the same game that was released on PS3 and 360, and it was shite. Yeah, it looked the business. It looked very, very nice for a handheld game, but control wasn't there, the level design wasn't there. It was bland and dull and just underwhelming in every way, shape or form. Yeah, such a shame, because there could have been potential there. This is a game I picked up on launch. This helped me decide to buy a PSP along with the next game. Seeing these games in action made me splash the cash. I didn't want to wait for a UK version. At the time, there was no idea when the UK version of a PSP was going to be launched, so I picked up my American PSP. Actually it was my Japanese PSP, the Asian model, and I also picked up the American copy of Dynasty Warriors Volume 1 with the machine. I am a Dynasty Warriors hardened fan. I have every Dynasty Warriors game available, from the very first game on the PS1 all the way up to my pre-order of Dynasty Warriors 9 on Xbox One. I got all the side games, Warriors Orochi, Samurai Warriors Katana, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Dynasty Tactics, all of those I have. So when I saw this on PSP, I had to get it, and this did not disappoint me. It takes the Dynasty Warriors franchise style and breaks it down into bite-sized chunks so that you can play it on the go. So you have these small couple of minute long play sessions where you'd advance to the next section, then you can save, and then you can get off your bus stop or your train stop or whatever you're doing and continue playing later on. I spent many an hour on the flight back from Asia to the UK playing this game. It got to the point where I had to charge my PSP twice. And the PSP charge lasted a long time, especially when you've got 2 batteries on the bloody thing, like I did. The other game that swayed me to get a PSP was this one, Ridge Racer, and this was absolutely breathtaking when it first came out. This had graphics that looked like they were magic on the handheld. They looked better than a lot of the PS2 games coming out at the time, kind of on a par with Xbox and GameCube games. They looked really, really crisp, and seeing it on that screen in the palm of your hand, feeling how good this game played, seeing how fast it ran, even though it was running at 30 frames a second, it felt quick. Seeing that in action, I knew I had to have it, so I did. So this one's actually the Asian version. This one is a Japanese copy because this is the first game that I bought, and it was just absolutely stunning. I loved Ridge Racer, and its sequel I really enjoyed. Here's another one I got for review purposes. This one favoured a lot more reasonably than the Pirates of the Caribbean game did. This is Formula Front Extreme Battle Armored Core. Yes, giant armored core robots smashing the shit out of each other in arenas with broken down skyscrapers, and it was just great. You could customize your mech, you could customize it to your heart's desire. You can add your weapons, you can change weapons on each arm, you got shoulder weapons, you had visual aesthetics that you could change as well, paint jobs, and you had this kind of ranking system where you worked your way through the ranks through massive multiplayer battles. Really cool, really cool, and I had a lot of fun playing this. And this one my wife got for me for my birthday one year. Resistance Retribution, and I was really pleasantly surprised with this game. To be honest with you, I didn't really like Resistance on the PS3. The first Resistance was lackluster to say the least, way back in 2007 when this was launched. However, Resistance 2 on the PS3 picked up the pace somewhat and was pretty good, and this followed suit. This was probably better than Resistance 2 was on the PS3. I loved playing this. It took into consideration the handheld's limitations and the control scheme, and used that to its advantage to make a really tightly knit, speedy action game. And yeah, the weapons felt satisfying. The level layout was intense. It was colourful. It wasn't just a sea of brown like Resistance was. It had various colour in there too. The sound effects were very good also, and you could play it online in versus multiplayer, so that made it really cool. Okay, so that's PSP out the way. Should we go to PS1? I've got a huge stack of PS1 here. Boom. So this is what I'm going through. First off, I mentioned what a fan I am of Wipeout, so it's no surprise to see Wipeout 3. Yeah. Wipeout 3 was up until, you know, the newer editions. When this first came out, Wipeout 3 was the best of the bunch by a long shot. It took everything that made Wipeout and Wipeout 2097/XL great and just turned every single dial up. You had more vehicles, you had faster speeds, you had more intense level design with multiple routes, you had a great soundtrack. Although not as great as Wipeout XL or 2097's, but still a great soundtrack. That was a top-notch game all around, and I have no idea why it didn't sell as much as Wipeout 2097 did, because it deserved to do much better. Wipeout 3 Special Edition that came out after this sold a fair amount fair amount more, and at least they recovered somewhat with that game. I like my light gun games, as you will find out in the near future. I'm going to be doing some light gun videos, so look out for those. And one of the light games is going to be Time Crisis. Yes, Time Crisis. The Sony answer, well, the Namco answer, should I say, to Virtua Cop. Is it as good as Virtua Cop? Graphically, yes. It adds some new mechanics. You've got this pedal, which you actually push down to poke your head out of cover and duck under cover to reload. Then you duck out and you bam bam bam, and then you duck under, and then you bam bam bam, and you duck under, and bam bam bam, so on and so forth. Pretty cool. Graphically stunning, but for me, Virtua Cop was just more fun. It was just more fun. However, that's not to say Time Crisis was not a good game. Not in the slightest. I really like Time Crisis. I just prefer Virtua Cop. Hydro Thunder, the classic version. So I picked this up for £7, purely because I was such a fan of the N64 and the Dreamcast versions that I already had. So I thought, hey, may as well get the set for £7. I'll get it on the PlayStation as well. Was it great? Well, for the hardware, they did a good job, I think. They certainly tried their best, and they did an admirable attempt at bringing a fairly technologically advanced arcade game to the aging PS1. The speed suffered a little bit though, and the graphics suffered a little bit. But on the plus side, the PlayStation has some exclusives. So it's got a circuit mode where you can run around the courses in loops, and it's also got a time trial mode. So I'm still very thankful that I own the PlayStation version of this game. Pretty cool. But if you have multiple systems like a Dreamcast, get it on Dreamcast or PC or any other system. All of the versions are greater than the PlayStation one. Okay, you may have heard of Grand Theft Auto. You may have heard of the Driver series, but have you heard of Felony 1179? Also known as Runabout in Japan, Felony 1179 reminds me more of a Die Hard game than it would an actual Grand Theft Auto style game. Give me a moment. That is my phone. Well, we can ignore that because I'm not at work right now. Screw work. Okay. So yes, Felony 1179 is a how do you explain it? A action frenzy racing game. There are certain objectives that you have to complete on every level. It could be as simple as just get to the checkpoint as quickly as you possibly can before time runs out, or it could be disarm every bomb around the city before one blows up. And you do that just by smashing your way left, right and centre through the city streets, causing absolute chaos in your wake. Yeah, and just having a blast doing it. It's fast, it's frenetic, it's fucking awesome. Speaking of awesome, Tobal #1. Now this seems like it's suffered, oh yeah, this has suffered a bit of damage. Shit. Okay, that's a shame. Is the disc okay? Yeah, luckily the disc seems alright, it's just the case is a bit busted. I can easily fix that. So Tobal number 1 is a Squaresoft fighting game. And a very good one at that. Not only have you got a very competent fighting game in here, where you fight against animals, other human beings, some really interesting and varied characters, but you've also got a quest mode which acts like an action RPG, where you roam around these dungeons with your fighting skills and try and get to the end of each dungeon level. It was very, very cool and a welcome change to the other fighters of the time. Tobal number 1 got a sequel called Tobal 2. Tobal 2 didn't quite hit the same spot that the first game did for me. Tobal number 1 has a very dear special place in my heart, and I've spent countless hours playing it. This hasn't got a place in my heart whatsoever though. Shadow Madness, yeah, it's a Crave RPG across 2 discs, and it's utterly forgetful and forgettable. I've played it for about an hour and then lost all interest. It just didn't grab me whatsoever. As I say, it is on 2 discs, so it's quite expansive, and it probably will be a good RPG if you could commit to it, but I can't commit to it. I lost interest a long time ago. And the same can be said for Dracula 2: The Last Sanctuary. This is an evolution of the Myst style games, you know, pre-rendered screenshot adventure games where you go from one screenshot to the next. This adds a 360-degree view, and the cryo engine was pretty good at doing stuff like that, but the story didn't grab me, the graphics didn't grab me, the style didn't grab me. It was just you know, it was just there. I can't remember how much I paid for it, but whatever I paid for it, I probably paid too much. This I had a good time with though. The Chessmaster 3D, and this has become quite rare over time. It was a fantastic chess game for the PlayStation. It had very nice graphics for the time. It played a mean game of chess. You could play it in training mode, or you could ramp it all the way up to Grandmaster level. It took a while for the computer to figure out what move it was going to make, but once it did, chances are it was going to kick your ass. And yeah, I had a great time playing Chessmaster. In fact, I think for many a month, I would play a game of chess before bed every day. It helped calm my mind. This has got a very calm ambience in its background, music and visuals. And I used to play it to just get my brain working a little bit, to tire myself out to sleep. That's not saying the game sends you to sleep or that it's crap. It just, for me, this helped me chill out. And I will always be thankful for that. And this looks like it's seen better days. Oh yeah, the front's trashed. So depressing when you see games that not only have you spent your hard-earned cash on, but have been with you for years, and then you see them damaged after, you know, an accident. Darkstalkers 3 suffered a wee bit of damage. Luckily, the game and the manual seem okay. It's just the box. But yeah, the box is a bit trashed, which is a shame. Darkstalkers 3 is the 3rd in the famous Capcom fighting game series, where you can fight a Yeti against a Frankenstein's monster, and it had a really cool style. It was never as good as Street Fighter in my opinion, but it was pretty good, and it had its moments. There's an English zombie that shreds on guitar and has a chainsaw for a leg. He was quite fun. I also like Morrigan a lot. I like her combo system and the way she fights. And she looks good too, which helps. Yeah, I like the art direction, should I say. And the art was directed mostly at her breasts for the most part. But yeah, it looked really good. It looked really good. And the game was great. The problem with the PlayStation version as opposed to the Sega Saturn version, much like almost every fighting game on PS1, the lack of RAM in the system made it hard to keep the frames of animation in there, so it was quite janky in the way it moved. Here we go, here's one that you don't hear much about nowadays. Burning Road! Burning Road, yes. Burning Road, funnily enough, was going to be touted as the PlayStation's answer to Daytona USA. Yeah. Not because the game was on Daytona racetracks, or the game was really similar apart from that it was a racing game, but because the HUD looked like Daytona, and because the car looked a bit like the Daytona car, there was a lot of comparisons made. It doesn't live up to those comparisons, but it is still very fun. It's a much more arcadey style of race compared to Daytona. It's a much more bump and bounce and scratch and grind your way through racing kind of game. The levels are crazy, they get quite interesting later on. And yeah, I think this is great, and it's a shame that not a lot of people know about it. Burning Road, if you ever get the chance to play it, please do. Tell me what you think if you have played it as well. I'm a big fan. Okay, next up, we have a sports game. Yay! Look at how thick the manual is for this sports game. It is NBA Live 97. Now, if you're watching this now, you should have hopefully seen that recently I did a random select version of the Saturn game of NBA Live 97. Well, the PlayStation version is pretty much exactly the same. It might have a few better transparency effects, but the PlayStation version is brilliant too. It's got Shaquille O'Neal in there, it's got all the licensed players that you know and love from 1996. The gameplay is great, the camera's a little janky, but then again, all 3D games were at that time, you know? It plays a pretty damn good game of basketball still, and you could probably pick it up for £1. So if you like old sports games, you could do a lot worse, trust me. You could do a lot worse. Here's the next one. Now I've lost the inlay from the look of it, and the box is trashed to all... Oh, shoot. It's just snapped in my hand while I opened it. That's not good. It's Risiko. Risk. Yeah. Don't know why they put Risiko at the top and not Risk, but hey ho. So this is based on the famous board game of the same name. The idea is to maneuver your way across the world and dominate it, essentially. Great game, in physical form, on a board, or on video game form. Risk is fantastic. This particular version of Risk has a very realistic kind of aesthetic, but you can get newer versions of the game where you've got a more cartoony visual. And the more cartoony visual one is probably the way to go, because also they sped up the pace of the gameplay too. The pace of the gameplay is much faster, much more fluid, and you can play it online with your buddies as well. You don't have to be sat on the same table playing it. Now this game, a lot of people hate, but I love it. Road Rash 3D, yes. The first 3D Road Rash game, and, well, according to many people, started the Road Rash series on the road to nowhere. But for me, Road Rash 3D took a franchise I knew and loved, put it into 3D, made it look fast, make it feel rough, you know, and not make it feel rough as in, oh, this game plays rough or it handles rough, but the way that the bikes move and the weight of your characters and the weight of your punches as you punch somebody off the side of their bike felt rough, you know, it felt gritty, and I really liked it. The soundtrack was kick-ass as well. It got me interested in a lot of bands that I hadn't heard of, like the Tea Party, who I ended up having to import a lot of albums from the States to listen to. Yeah, I listened to them first in Road Rash 3D. In my opinion, the series tanked with Road Rash 64 and Road Rash Jailbreak. Road Rash 3D, in my humble opinion, was the last good Road Rash game. Next up, and the last PlayStation game on the list, Driver. Driver, in my opinion, again, this is my opinion, was heavily overrated. This was touted to be the second coming of Christ before this got launched. It was a game by Reflections, who did Shadow of the Beast back on the Commodore Amiga. Graphically, it looked leaps and bounds ahead of any other game that we'd seen on the PlayStation at that time. But the gameplay just wasn't there. This came out the same year as the Sega Dreamcast did in Japan. So for me, having a Japanese Dreamcast on launch, this didn't look as good as a lot of people believed it looked. And it was frustrating. It slowed down as you turned corners. The garage level at the beginning of the game, where you have to do certain tricks, was extremely finicky. But oh, excuse me. But once you get past all that and you focus on the key core of the game, it was okay. Once you got actually driving on the road, evading police, taking jumps and sliding your way through busy Miami streets. Was it Miami? I think it was Miami. Yeah, through busy Miami streets in 70s style cars, and very reminiscent of the Bullet movie with Steve McQueen. It was okay. It was just very, very overrated. So that's end of PlayStation time. Wow, PlayStation time. I've got an audio CD here. Music from Final Fantasy Chronicles, Chrono Trigger. That's the audio CD. These are quite hard to come by nowadays. And yeah, I went through a stage of collecting video game soundtracks until it got ridiculously expensive to import them from Japan. I'd end up spending £15 on a disc and then 10 quid to ship it. It started getting crazy, so I had to stop. But I stopped. I think my last soundtrack was Jet Set Radio when that came out. I think that was the last one I picked up, and that was a good point to finish. I think that was a very good soundtrack indeed. Okay, we got a couple of PS2 bits. So first one, Spectral vs. Generation. This is a two-dimensional fighting game by Idea Factory. It's not very well known, and it's not a top-tier fighting game, but it was very enjoyable, and you could certainly find a lot worse with that Midas label on there. This was actually quite respectable. It was a hidden gem, so to speak. And I thought it was pretty cool. It reminded me a lot of the Guilty Gear series and the way that it's drawn and the style of the fighting. It's very Guilty Gear, Blaze Blue-esque. Quite a lot of fun. But nowhere near as fun as this. This is awesome. You can't buy it. Well, you can buy it, but you couldn't buy it at the time. This came to retail stores as a promotion only. Virtua Fighter 10th Anniversary Edition. Now, Virtua Fighter 10th Anniversary Edition takes all of the characters you know and should hopefully love from Virtua Fighter 4, and it puts them into Virtua Fighter 1. So it uses Virtua Fighter 1 style bare polygons throughout the game. It does allow you to keep some of the moves that were brought in later in the series, but all of the evasion and everything like that has been taken out. It's a very pure distilled version of Virtua Fighter 4 with Virtua 1 style graphics. As a Virtua Fighter fan, I absolutely thought this was brilliant. It was just brilliant. Virtua Fighter is still the best fighting game that you can get. the Virtua Fighter series, should I say. Virtua Fighter as a series is the best fighting game available. Full stop. 2D, 3D, doesn't matter. Virtua Fighter's number 1, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike's number 2. Simple. Virtua Fighter 10th anniversary. You can pick it up on eBay. It's starting to get quite expensive and it is quite hard to get hold of. But if you do see it cheap, yeah, grab it. Okay, and we've got one last PS2 game here. I haven't played this. I keep meaning to play it. I've seen it in my shelf when I was cleaning out boxes, and I keep saying to myself, yeah, I should bring that out and play it. Carmen Sandiego, The Secret of the Stolen Drums. A 3D adventure platform game, apparently, based on the old Carmen Sandiego puzzle-solving education games. I think this is going to be really cool. I haven't seen much online about it, and I've been kind of steering away from everything I do see because I want to keep it as a surprise. But just looking at the quality of the graphics and the style of the 3D for the era, it looks pretty cool, and I'm hoping I'll be pleasantly surprised. Okay, so I think that's enough for another video. The rest I'm going to save for Unpack Attack number 4. Anyway, thank you for watching with me. I'll just space force myself to end the video now. Take care. See you on the next one. Bye.